Today I want to draw a comparison between Lord Lymington, the main antagonist of this channel, who during the 1930s devised an aristocratic brand of fascism that was a lot like feudalism, and Lord Glasman, who is a very influential Labour peer who founded the very conservative and ostensibly truly working class Blue Labour faction within the party. This might seem a little bit far-fetched, but bear with me, this is an important one. We will draw this comparison principally through a short passage in Lord Lymington's 1931 book Ich Dien, The Tory Path. Ich Dien is German for I serve. A feudal society is about service. The workers personally serve the lord who owns the land, and the lord personally serves the monarch, so it's hierarchical as well. And in this short passage, in this book, Lymington compares socialism, that you might associate with the Labour Party, to his brand of aristocratic fascism. And he argues that the only way you can achieve what socialists want is through his vision, which made me think of Maurice Glasman. So just as a quick recap, we've talked about Lord Lymington quite a lot in these videos. He was a Conservative MP who thought that the role of the aristocracy was in ruling, and without this ruling class, society would surely fall apart. He and some friends, including right-wing journalist Douglas Jerrold, tried to hijack the governing Conservative Party in 1933 in order to install a dictator called Lord Lloyd. This doesn't work, so Douglas Jerrold, after failing to end British democracy, delivered General Francisco Franco to Spain and starts the Spanish Civil War. Lymington, meanwhile, lost faith in Parliament and vacated his seat in order to start a series of movements that would eventually become the Soil Association, as he thought that organic farming would force feudalism into existence by reducing the food supply and starving the cities out of existence. Lord Lymington was a Tory in the 18th century sense. This means he is a feudalist. He said Toryism is often jibed at as a relic of feudalism. It is. This Toryism was in opposition to modern conservatism, which Lymington believed wasn't conservative at all and actually only served the financial interests. Toryism is also in opposition to progressive politics, which morphed from Whiggism to liberalism and then to socialism as history progressed. But Lymington was a very interesting man because I think he genuinely believed that what he was fighting for was in the interests of everybody and part of human nature. Lymington said the aristocratic instinct lies within the working man, and he talks obsessively about the peasants he has on his estate who don't need the government to give them healthcare or pensions because they live healthy lives and are looked after by each other within a community. And after the war, he thinks England is a lost cause and goes to Kenya, where he does rule over peasants, or servants as he calls them. And in this, he finally felt fulfilled. He cared about these people. But today we have the concept of the anti-hero. Elon Musk, for example, probably doesn't see himself as the good guy. He's dark gothic MAGA. He's the bad guy, but it's kind of edgy and fun. Lymington's not like that. He's a bad guy who thinks he's a good guy, which is what makes him interesting. Lord Lymington was anti-capitalist in a conservative sense. He thought that the Protestant Reformation made people individualistic, which undermined the principle of service. Individualism has nearly eradicated this relic of service to the crown, and therefore the nation. So this divergence away from the Catholic faith gave rise to liberalism and capitalism, social progressivism, free markets and such. And he thinks that the capitalist worldview treats human labour as a commodity and produces too much of it. The people, resigned to industrialism and the Industrial Revolution, brought up undernourished children in ever-increasing quantities to swell the amount and therefore cheapen the commodity of human labour. So from capitalism, you get an unnatural population size who are undernourished and sick. So the government has to step in to rectify these problems. That's socialism. Each Act of Parliament, every charity was undertaken to palliate a specific ill rather than prevent disease in the body politic. We became drug addicts. Relief for the moment mattered more than health for the future. Insensibly and inevitably, we have gone from Whiggism to socialism. The evils of individualism have had to be checked by the inspectors of bureaucracy. So to Lymington, socialism was fixing the problems of capitalism with regulations and taxation for the state provision of goods. But he believed socialism was just building on the fundamentally unsound capitalist system. Liberalism taught that you could serve yourself for profit and the devil take the hindmost. Radical socialism taught the remedy, state compulsion to make individuals behave, state doles for the victims of individualism. But while these measures were to help the people, Lymington also wanted to help the people. He wanted the same things as the socialists. His utmost concern is the producers, the captain and private in industry and agriculture, the soldier, the sailor and the servant of the nation in far and difficult dependencies are the persons who matter. But this, says the socialist, might be part of the socialist ideal. True enough. But while he says socialism and Toryism share the same aims, socialism cannot work. The socialist aim is muddled by wanting opposites, equality, fraternity and liberty. To avoid these inherent contradictions, Lymington argues the aims of socialism can only be achieved in an aristocratic state. Only feudalism, based on service to a strong leader who is free to act and unfettered by the rule of law, can achieve what the socialists want. The Tory believes in samurai leading, the socialist in the state inspector. The Tory believes, given the free leadership to develop the nation will have the courage to answer. That is aristocracy. The socialist believes that what democracy has failed to accomplish can be obtained by compelling the democrat. So that's his argument in a nutshell. To achieve the aims of socialism, you have to have a brand of conservatism that will undo capitalism, and the people will be looked after. But before we move on to Glasman, I want to take a look at some of the scribbles written in the margins of this book, which were clearly written by somebody who agrees with the author. In this passage about the development of science and technological advancements and the Americanization of English culture, the owner of this book has scribbled what I think is the word hell. There is a slight irony here in that Lymington was half American, born in Chicago, and he grew up in Wyoming. But most powerfully, after a book making the political case for the undoing of democracy in the entire modern era, Lymington ends with a call. The English are waiting to respond if only our leaders be willing to sacrifice their ease of mind and ease of way, and if need be, the whole that they possess to the imperial service of the crown. The English need a leader if they are to return to greatness, and the reader of this book has noted underneath, patiently, thoughtfully, we await the Superman. There is some Nietzschean influence here. The Superman means an individual who is not weak like the current aristocracy, but a genuinely supreme person who will earn the service of the people and lead them in undoing the modern society that has made them unhealthy and sick. Now this is of course imagined. There probably is no Superman, and if there was, there is no saying that such a person would rise. But who is the Superman? Maurice Glasman founded Blue Labour, which takes a socially conservative position and ties that to socialist economics. They say our socialism is both radical and conservative. And that view probably isn't miles away from the position of my favourite book, Disraeli and the New Age by George Stapledon, which we talked about in this video. This book offers a blueprint for post-war society that is conservative literally in a small c sense, in that it argues we must conserve culture within a spirit of tolerance and mutual understanding that allows citizens to interact with other cultures and become enriched. This is a large part of the reason we have national parks, so rural culture is preserved and townspeople can interact with it on holiday and benefit from what they experience. Stapledon's view also included state support for agriculture and formed the basis of the post-war consensus in the countryside that was originally implemented by the Labour Party. And I do think socialism almost has to be a little bit conservative, and that you have to conserve the working class as a community and cultural institution in order to improve their condition. Stapledon's broad point is that you can't stop the passage of time. Things change, but in that we want to preserve the things that work and fix the things that don't. But that's small c conservatism. Blue Labour seem a little bit more big C. They don't quite say this so explicitly on their own website, but Wikipedia describes their conservatism as about immigration, crime, diversity and inclusion, and community spirit. And they are quite influential over the present Labour government. Lord Glasman, their founder, described Starmer as a true conservative, and Glasman said of Starmer's chief of staff, Morgan McSweeney, who seems to be steering the entire government, as one of ours, we love him. But despite this immense influence over the direction of government, they are also quite a small group. The Wikipedia page lists 6 MPs, mostly new intake. They claim the membership is into double digits, but many have chosen to stay anonymous. I'm not sure why this requires secrecy, but there we are. They count the new Home Secretary amongst their members, and she also chairs Labour's National Executive Committee. This might be a small faction, but it is a powerful one. Blue Labour is sometimes presented as a return to the principles of Attlee's post-war government, but it isn't quite. They want democratic community management and provision of services rather than a top-down bureaucratic welfare state, which would be comparable to the ideals of the Attlee government. Glasman said the sting in the tail of 1945 was that it broke all of the mutual solidarity, the ways we took care of each other, and handed them over to the state. This, of course, overlooks the fact that life in 1930s Britain was pretty rubbish for a lot of people. But this is quite important because it sort of mirrors Lymington's belief that communities can provide for people rather than the folly of a modern bureaucratic welfare state. And this, in Lymington's vision, is personal. He wants the Lord to personally lead and guide the community and be appreciated for it. Blue Labour, perhaps similarly, wants a more relational style of politics. But as such, like Lymington, Blue Labour seems quite opposed to the rules-based order that emerged after the war that saw bureaucrats ensuring citizens' rights were respected. The European project was seen as a problem for this reason. Glasman wrote that leaving the European Union is the necessary goal of the left in Britain. This is to pursue an industrial policy and change the direction of the economy in favour of those places and people abandoned by globalisation. Fundamentally, this is because his vision is incompatible with the social democratic state maintained by the European Union. He says redistributing financial services would be in breach of EU competition law, and I think quite tenuously suggests that we couldn't renationalise the railways because it must fit with capitalism in the European model. He then says something that could have been lifted straight out of Lymington's book. The fundamental process of capitalism is to turn human beings and nature into commodities that are bought and sold in fluctuating markets. Socialism must redistribute wealth and power, and there are tiers ahead. You might at this point be getting a sense that Glasman's ideas are a little bit unusual, and he certainly thinks that his less enlightened colleagues in the House of Lords can't grasp it. They shake their heads in sorrowful incomprehension and drift back to their old friends. But I think that incomprehension is well founded. The eroding of social democratic protections and freedoms that we've seen in this country recently, in the pulling of farm support, for example, has caused tears. But I don't see that it's moved us in a socialist direction. In 1947, the Labour Party socialised agriculture, and the European Union continued that along similar lines through their common agricultural policy. And now we have left that safety net, we're being exposed to the world market. And because in that model British farmers are no longer needed to feed the nation, they've levied an inheritance tax to get rid of us. But you have global asset managers like BlackRock dining with the King and Donald Trump in Windsor Castle, while working families in the countryside are being stripped of the land they work. Surely this is the opposite of what Glasman wants. But Glasman operates in a world alongside many very powerful figures who probably do want this sort of shift. He's on the advisory board of the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, alongside members of investment groups who also chair GB News, Reform UK MP Danny Kruger, Jordan Peterson, this guy, right-wing American politicians, and Paul Marshall, who is a lead investor into GB News. Here Glasman sticks out a little bit. All of these other people are very much on the right-wing, big C conservative side of the political spectrum. But he sees himself as a true socialist. Why then is he aligning with these people who don't believe in European social democracy? When the Attorney General Lord Hermer defended the need for the government to abide by international law and suggested we should not leave the European Convention on Human Rights, Glasman called for him to be removed from his post, saying he was the absolute archetype of an arrogant progressive fool who thinks that law is a replacement for politics. But of course, politics is the battle to design law. Glasman seems to want a different form of politics. This is a prominent thread in Glasman's thought. He's not keen on laws, and this mirrors what Lymington believed. Aristocrats are men of taste who must be free to govern as they see fit. Law would only restrict them and make their governance weak.
For us, how can there be a socialist, insurgent, pro-worker, pro-nation state, sovereignty position to change the economic structures? This space opens up now within this. there's a breaking of the multilateral treaty world where you can't do any politics. You can't do it because it's illegal, Freddie. It's illegal to do anything. And it's also broken this idea that any anti-capitalist, pro-democracy, pro-nation state movement is populist. But, this is bad, very bad. Populism, very bad. So, the rule of lawyers, I want to see that broken. I want to see the re-emergence of real democratic politicians who act.
Neither is he particularly keen on education. He called to close down half of all universities and turn them into vocational colleges, just to open the conversation. There is something to be said for vocational training, but Lymington similarly argued that there was no need to educate the working class because they didn't need to be educated. They were never going to govern. This suggestion on education was a footnote on a much broader suggestion by Glasman that the Treasury be abolished. This would suggest a complete turn away from the sort of bureaucratic socialist state that gave us the National Health Service. We need to abolish the Treasury, Lord Glasman said. That's just got to go. The Treasury is staffed by PPE graduates who are really neoclassical. They don't understand the meaning of vocation and the meaning of work. This is again similar to Lymington's emphasis on community and honest, productive work in contrast to corrupted and parasitic, unproductive capitalistic trading. There is of course a bit of a divergence in that Lymington wanted to deindustrialise and have agricultural peasants and artisans be the workers of the country, while Glasman wants to reindustrialise, but I think in both views they put productive, honest, meaningful work at the centre of their vision. Lymington wanted to rebuild an English peasantry, a sort of medieval rural working class, while Glasman wants to rebuild the working class in a more conventional sense. And I think Glasman himself sees a link here. He presents his ideas as a tradition about workers that is conservative and predates the Labour Party.
What I see is that Blue Labour is a tradition of thought, a Labour tradition of thought, but it precedes Labour. It's very Catholic, very nonconformist, the idea of the Norman yoke, the idea of the freeborn English, the idea of liberty. The only thing you need to remember about today, things can only get better. That's not true, okay? The future, we die for a start, we lose loved ones, we get rejected by people we love, very difficult things happen. The future is tragic, and we have to have a politics that can deal with tragedy, whereas this is just an ideology of idiotic optimism, which doesn't leave us prepared to do any of the necessary things that we have to do. Everything about progressivism is this idea that things can only get better, that the arc of history bends in one way, and then Donald Trump got elected.
And within this, like Lymington, he opposes progress. Progress is not to be expected, and if you oppose this restoration, you will lose. Blue Labour is inevitable.
Imagine being someone who built your whole ideology on things can only get better, and things are obviously, the response is fascism, far right fascism. That's the immediate response, hunker down, insult people, lose.
But I digress. Lord Glasman says that after the Treasury is abolished, the Treasury's powers should be given to the Prime Minister, and the office will get some advisors, it seems. So he's getting rid of the bureaucrats and investing the power in the hands of one person who is not constrained by law or the protections for citizens that you get in a rules-based order. He is trying to build the Superman, or perhaps in more normal language, some sort of king. But the king is not supposed to be a politician in the sense we're used to.
I am absolutely committed to the democratic monarchy. I love the fact that our head of state is the king. I think it's an object of affection and loyalty outside politics. And I don't like politicians as presidents and heads of state because it gets ugly.
And America seems to be the model for this.
Trump views himself as a king. What I've heard on the American side is he's beginning to sign executive orders as King Trump. Right, we now must view America as a monarchy.
Glasman doesn't seem to see this as a bad thing. He persistently and proudly boasts that he was the only Labour politician to be invited to Trump's inauguration, and this is what he had to say about that.
Here, a real genuine working class enthusiasm. They think that globalisation is going to end. They think that there's going to be proper union jobs. This is the interesting thing. I spoke with Steve Bannon last night, and he was just talking about trade unions and how to strengthen labour. This is absolutely not what people are expecting. All the energy, Rod, is right in MAGA square, and there's the basic thing is that there's a left and a right. The right side of MAGA square is Elon Musk and what do you call them, transhumanist oligarchs who want to build condos on Mars. Then there's a massive working class base that wants a stable life, stable jobs, wants an end to the humiliation of the lanyard and the thought police. That's what's going on. And so right now, just to report back, there's a huge energy and a sense of almost resurrection, restoration. You know, they want to make America great again.
So he sees Steve Bannon and MAGA as a vehicle towards socialism, led by King Trump, who believes in a small state, as we saw with the Department of Government Efficiency. But he doesn't need the state, because his absolute power overrides the rule of law.
Trump has all the attributes of a king. It's worth talking about.
Yeah, well, let's come back to that.
Have you seen the size of the executive order? Yeah. I saw him sign at a rally executive orders in front of a crowd of 20,000, holding them up. It was an extraordinary...
We did it last night in the Capitol at his speech. I mean, that is his style, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's imperial, senatorial, Caesarist, or in a more modern term, Bonapartist. That's how it is. And my sense of MAGA Square is that they are devoted to the king, that they support the king, as we do, of course.
Our king.
Our king, yeah.
Glasman dislikes international institutions that might restrict the behaviour of the king. The following is put to him as a question, but he clearly agrees with it and thinks the World Health Organization is part of the problem. King Trump is discarding these restrictions.
So we have got institutions that are riddled with things like DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, with ESG, with a range of these measures.
Oh yeah, ESG.
And so you have this announcement. It was really bold. It was really clear. Free speech. Drill, baby, drill.
They've left the WHO.
Paris.
They've Paris withdrawn.
And he comes out with some really unusual perspectives on history.
Obviously, I think the American Revolution was a mistake. The French Revolution was a mistake. I think the future is very democratic monarchies.
Presumably this is because in these actions, the Americans and the French got rid of their monarchy. Yet Trump is a monarch. Getting rid of the king is futile. The need for a monarchy is part of human nature. The aristocratic instinct is within the working man. Failure to appreciate this produces a weak state with indecisive leadership.
France to fight to defend Ukraine?
I don't care about France. Okay, I need to just say I really can't judge France, and my attitude to France is Second World War, they were completely conquered in 3 weeks. I don't trust their will.
It's a long time ago, but yeah.
No, I'm saying, at first they say, there's an old song, first they say they do, and then they don't, and then you say you will, and then you won't. We know. Ever since the French Revolution, they've been a bit confused, let's put it that way.
But now Britain has been freed from the shackles of the European Union, we are able to remilitarise, which is a crucial part of the reconstruction of the working class through vocational training.
The army is the best vocational trainer. Go to the small towns, recruit engineers, all these things. Be a patriotic party that will lead. You know, we're a leading nation, and so we can lead. So that we could be in alliance with the United States, because the EU, you think you're worried about it, Germany, France, Austria, they're disintegrating because they can't do anything. Blue Labour is sovereigntist. We were very strong for Brexit, to leave the EU. I want to see my country actually embrace the possibilities of that industrial strategy, build up our army, be the leader in Europe, those things.
This idea that if we reconstruct the British worker, we can dominate Europe is again very similar to what Lymington believed. Both the peasant in his view and the working class in Glasman's are the fighting force of the nation. If they are rebuilt, we will be unstoppable. Lymington illustrated this by pointing to the Battle of Agincourt, where purebred, strong English peasants crushed the French. But he considered that by the time of the First World War, they had become corrupted by capitalism, and their innate superiority over the Europeans no longer existed. He believed the answer to this was rebuilding the peasantries. Glasman says this reindustrialised, remilitarised Britain must align with the United States.
So I'm a Bevanite. I really love Ernest Bevin. Yeah. And when he was Foreign Secretary in 1945, he laid it out. He said that any British government now has to have an alignment with the United States. And at the same time, we have to have a powerful enough armed forces, but that's not a colonial relationship. He absolutely understood the necessity of alignment and distance.
And this alignment seems to encompass Trumpism and MAGA.
Labour's not just one choice. It either aligns with MAGA or it resists MAGA. And my argument is if it resists MAGA, we're basically an inferior version of Sweden.
He mentions Sweden there. He seems to believe in a hierarchy of nation states that compete and can dominate each other by force, which is why we must remilitarize. But that is the spirit that led to both world wars. And it's the very thing the European project is designed to prevent by integrating nations through trade. He thinks that with a restored working class, Britain will be at the top of the hierarchy, within Europe at least. But a crucial part of making that happen is inspiration from MAGA.
Alan, you must have witnessed the working class energy around MAGA. Oh, there's something to behold. Incredible. I went with Steve Bannon to the rally to the people who didn't get in. I mean, could you imagine in England, 30,000, 40,000 people driving spontaneously from Kentucky and Indiana, truckers, engineers, car mechanics, straightforward people who just wanted to come and bear witness to a change they were longing.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something that we can't even comprehend in our politics, but we should. You know, this is populism.
Yeah.
And populism is fantastic. It's not a bad thing. They are smashing up the rules of a rules-based international order. They're intent on breaking the law. They're going to put America first, sovereignty, industry, working class.
Another similarity with Lymington is that Glasman sees MAGA as a Catholic movement. Protestantism produced individualism and capitalism, which was wrong. MAGA is undoing these last few centuries of progress.
Historically, the Republicans have been the Protestant party, you know, the WASP party, a very individual sense of responsibility and redemption, but certainly Vance and Bannon are much more Catholic.
And Cass.
And Cass, yeah, completely.
They're all three Catholics.
So my inspiration, one of my primary inspirations has always been Catholic social thought. You know, the dignity of labour, solidarity and everything, and subsidiarity, local.
And they want to see these characteristics of MAGA in England, which is in itself interesting. It's not a British movement they want, it's English.
I just love the working class. When I talk to working class people, they're ambitious. They want England mega, make England great again. It's going to be big. You know that.
No, we're just going to pause it at that. If you will allow it, I want to have a quick talk specifically to my fellow country people about the role the chap on the right plays. He is a founding member of the Together Association, which seems to be some estimation of M.E.G.A. Together are a remarkably well-funded campaign group that over the last few years have jumped on pretty much any issue that has people riled up. Over the past year or so, I have been part of a workers' protest movement. We took 1,400 tractors to Westminster in February, and we did our best to make a balanced and progressive case for the countryside to Parliament, sharing the stage with food poverty campaigners and getting quite a lot of press coverage. And I think we have successfully shifted the narrative on these issues. Left-wingers on Twitter no longer keep telling us to pay our tax. But this chap was there as well. He's founded a protest group called Farmers to Action, which calls for unhinged things that I'm sure Glasman would approve of. The workers uniting and disregarding the rule of law, undermining the state. But crucially, Together are able to call for such things because they're not farmers. It is the farmers who will suffer if the line is crossed. I don't like talking about these people on my channel because it gives them oxygen that they don't deserve. But if you want more information, I've covered them in detail on Scribehound. Link in the description. I think you can read it for free if you make an account. I'm not trying to villainise farmers for being angry or for participating in these protests. I am angry too. But we must realise why the Together Association has suddenly made itself known to us. And it's not just farmers they've introduced themselves to, it's seemingly all angry people. It's veterans, anti-ULEZ, anti-net zero, anti-vaccine, you name it, they are represented by this movement.
This is the great British decent public. With our farmers, we've got veterans here, we've got drivers, we've got carers, and people across the spectrum, what they call left, right and centre. We're not interested in all that. We're interested in the fundamental principles of liberty, privacy, justice and democracy.
They got farmers to box Kier Starmer into a building site, which was not helpful. They've earned an injunction for blockading supermarkets. They want Nigel Farage to be the benefactor of rural discontent, and when we refused to platform him because we were running an actually grassroots campaign, they ran a parallel event to let him speak. This fits with what Glasman wants, because since Labour won the election, he has been characterising Farage as the enemy to whom the workers who should vote for Labour are flocking. And he has been using this to push Starmer to move right to counter this threat, which will produce either a very right-wing Labour administration or, after the next election, a reform government. It is a tragedy that all of these grassroots protest groups are falling in behind the Together Association in their protests against the Labour government, while their main spokesman sits down and has a very friendly chat with someone exercising great influence over the political direction of the same Labour government. I would say from watching their interaction that these two people get on and want more or less the same thing. These people are not social democrats. They're not trying to restore the protections that our industry has recently lost. They want us to be angry. They want to rile us up into a new MAGA movement so we tear everything to the ground. And this is, unfortunately, starting to work. We are being played. They have convinced people to take the anger they feel and consciously emulate MAGA in this country. This is not just barking up the wrong tree, but actively campaigning for a further rollback of the social democratic state, when that rollback is the very thing that caused this pain in the first place. If Glasman was to watch this and watch me telling the MAGA crowd to snap out of it because bad actors are taking the piss out of them and making them campaign against their own interests, I think he would disregard what I was saying, because I have fallen into the same trap the progressive left has destroyed itself with. To go to the farmers, say, liable to be pulled into the orbit of Together and say, hold on chaps, you've got this wrong, is to patronise them and alienate them. They won't like me, they won't listen to me, they will fight against me, I will probably lose, and what they want will become reality. But if fighting against Blue Labour is futile, the alternative is to validate the position, which in turn allows it to become more extreme. You can't out-reform reform. Blue Labour made reform the enemy, so the cabinet all started waving England flags and talking about the St George's Cross decor in their living rooms, and then the Reform Party declared it would scrap indefinite leave to remain. I think it is very unlikely that if a mega movement was realised and a resurgent working class ripped down the old order, that Lord Glasman would be in a position to rebuild what he wants. It's not currently looking like Labour are going to get a second term because their shift to the right isn't proving very popular. But even though this is not working, somehow Blue Labour have such a grip on Starmer's administration that in the recent reshuffle to reset the government, they actually strengthen their position, getting Shabana Mahmood as Blue Labour Home Secretary.
I think that with Shabana Mahmood, he's made a choice that would be inconceivable a year ago at the Home Office. I mean, that would...
She was seen as a Blue Labour appointment.
Oh, she's way better than Blue Labour. Shabana Mahmood is like a holy object to me because she's a Muslim woman who loves this country. This is something we've got to treasure. And she loves the working class. And she will do everything in her power to stop the boats, secure the borders.
And so it continues. They're not even trying to appease their own party. They say because of immigrants, a defined enemy, they will do things unpopular with the Labour movement and cast away long-established legal protections.
In solving this crisis, you may not always like what I do. We will have to question some of the assumptions and legal constraints that have lasted for a generation and more.
The power of the judiciary and the courts in this country is being actively eroded by the government. Don't let the fact that the following is about a migrant blind you. The courts have been overridden by the government. That is a significant thing.
And she took the fight to the human rights lawyers on day one, when there was that deportation of the Eritrean who suddenly was a victim of modern slavery. She absolutely challenged it, and the court said he shouldn't go on Monday, but he went on Thursday. That's unprecedented.
The Labour government are insistent that the ECHR must be at least watered down, if not done away with, which is alarming. The Prime Minister this week says that we will have to take a second look at Articles 3 and 8 of the ECHR, which ban torture and protect the right to private and family life, respectively. Call me old-fashioned, but as a human, I quite like human rights and the rule of law, and I don't particularly trust the British government to behave itself. It's nice to have a higher authority to appeal to, if needs be, but it's become normalised to say that we should leave the European Convention on Human Rights so we can treat migrants differently. But what happens then? What if the government was then to start attacking a different socio-economic minority, like farmers, just hypothetically? Maybe they might try to change compulsory purchase legislation to dispossess farmers cheaply for house building. But the ECHR protects citizens' property rights. If we start removing bits of it, it is a slippery slope. Oh, we can get rid of those articles, they only affect migrants. I'm not a migrant, it won't affect me. Oh, we can get rid of those clauses, they protect property, and I don't have any property, it won't affect me. And so it happens. It is also strange that the specific clause that most of the opposition to the ECHR is centred around is about the right to family life, when family life is a key tenet of Blue Labour ideology. They say Blue Labour puts the family and relationships at the centre of its politics. Families are the bedrock of society. A stable home is the foundation for a successful life. But can you have a stable family life if you can't tick Blue Labour's box for indefinite leave to remain because you're part of a dual-income working-class household with 2 kids and you don't have time to do unpaid community work? So I don't think they are trying to facilitate more family life. More simply, they seem to be just trying to do away with the rule of law and the rights the post-war order gave to citizens. They have said as much. Whenever I do videos like this, I always get comments to the effect of, oh, I didn't realise these guys were so based. And that's fine. We welcome discussion in the comments. Thank you for your engagement. Although I would caution that encouraging the destruction of a rules-based order does not make you immune from the consequences. And as an aside, as my critics across the internet like to remind me, I have been a member of the Labour Party. And when I was at university, it was mostly populated by middle-class people who were socially progressive and leant towards neoliberalism and were often very dismissive of conservative, uneducated working-class people, including myself with my dirty background. But in my local constituency, the people there are members because they genuinely believe in a better world. They believe in social democracy or socialism. But none of these groups of people, middle-class neoliberals or the people in my local party, believe in any of this Blue Labour stuff. The party has been hijacked in pursuit of chaos in the same way the farming protest movement has. Glasman wants social Trumpism, remilitarisation, no rule of law, and Britain to be the superior military power within a Europe of competing nation-states under some form of autocracy. We will keep the king, yes, but we will also have supreme personal rule as the powers of the Treasury are invested in a Prime Minister unfettered by the rule of law and who probably isn't a politician in the conventional sense. In these things, Glasman's ideology is a bit similar to some political projects we have seen in history. I know he says he's a Democrat, but just as Lymington argued true socialism was really feudalism, and Glasman seems to have reached a comparable conclusion, Lymington argued true democracy was aristocracy, because if you present it to the people, they will choose it. The workers have the aristocratic instinct. It is natural and inevitable. The people want the Superman. If we do not present an opposition to this movement for chaos and destruction, as Glasman says, the process has only just started and there are tears ahead. See you next week.